Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So we are beginning with Emily Dickinson today, the famous American poetess, and we'll be discussing her life and works in this video lecture. Emily Dickinson was born in 1830 and died in 1886. She is famous for her poem, Because I Could Not Stop for Death. The theme of death is prevalent in the poetry of Emily Dickinson. Like whatever she's writing, she seems obsessed with this concept of death. Most of her poems, they are referring to death as in shape of allegory, in shape of personification, or she is going through that very scene or experience when a person is dying practically. So her obsession has a valid reason. So we'll be discussing that later on, that why was she obsessed with the concept of death. Emily Dickinson, in full, Emily Elizabeth Dickinson was born on December 10th, 1830 in Amherst, Massachusetts, and died on May 15, 1886 in the same place. American lyric poet who lived in seclusion for some time and commanded a singular brilliance of style and integrity of vision. With Walt Whitman, Dickinson is widely considered to be one of the two leading 19th century American poets. So she happens to be a very good poet or poetess of a time of the 19th century. Like we have poetry of modern American writers in front of us in shape of someone else is presenting. I'm requesting you not to present, please. The poetry of Dickinson is good in a way that it is not like the stereotypical people who are like writing about so many themes in one go, in one poem, like they're writing about so many different subjects in very like confusing manner. So the modern American society, am I audible to you? Like someone else is presenting, I don't know who it is. Mr. Kudrat Enam, please turn off your slides. Now, are my slides visible to you?
Yes, sir.
So, I request you not to do it whenever there's class going on. So she is different from rest of the people because that's what we were discussing. Because of her like concentration on a single topic. So her poetry is not intricate, her poetry is not confusing, and she's not putting in diverse themes which are replete in the modern American poetry. Emily Dickinson was born on 1830, and 1840 she went to her school for the first time. Her sister Lavinia, she was with her, and it was she who, after her death, printed a collection of poetry. In April 1844, her cousin dies. So this is the first saying or first interaction of Emily Dickinson with the concept of death. So from here onwards, we see that she saw many deaths of her beloved people around, her acquaintances. So she went through it, and moreover, we also know that wherever she was living, her lodgings, there was a cemetery nearby, a graveyard, uske bilkul back pe tha, where she often saw this burial ceremony. तो ये चीजें all together plus उसकी loneliness और वो जो time जो seclusion में गई, this all made her a lonely soul, और वो जो death का concept उस पर बड़ा obvious हो जाता है. In 1846, she meets Leonard Humphrey. So Humphrey was a principal where she was teaching, and he was very good friend of Dickinson and a very good mentor too. So he was an older person, and she refers to him as master because he taught her many things. In 1847, she has a trip. In 1848, she comes back. In 1850, her mentor, Leonard Humphrey, dies. So this is an unforgettable incident or a loss for Dickinson. In 1855, she travels outside. In 1856, her brother is married. In 1858, she starts copying her poems, and some of her verses appear in the Springfield Republican, a paper edited by her friend Samuel Bowles. In 1862, she has literary friendship. Like after reading an essay by literary critic and abolitionist Thomas Wentworth in the Atlantic Monthly, Dickinson writes him to ask him to review her poetry, and they strike up a correspondence that lasts for years. So for a long time, they continue to write letters to each other. So this is he was a pen pal of Dickinson. 1864 में इसकी poems publish होती हैं. Drum beat के लिए to raise money for Union soldiers' medical expenses. उसके लिए वो collection के लिए, charity के cause के लिए. 1867 in the life of Emily Dickinson is very important here. It is important because she went into isolation. Dickinson begins to voluntarily withdraw from social life, preferring to speak with visitors through a door rather than face-to-face. It is the most productive period of writing. She stays socially active by sending numerous letters to favorite correspondents. So, बाकी लोगों से वो out of touch हो गई थी. इसने मिलना जुलना खत्म कर दिया था. एक बाउंड्री के जरिए, दरवाजे के जरिए वो गुफ्तगू करती जो भी विजिटर्स होते. तो वो जो टाइम था, शी वाज अलोन, और उसने अकेले रह के बहुत कुछ लिखा. ये उसका एक प्रोलिफिक राइटिंग का टाइम था. देन शी मीट्स हिगिंसन इन 1870. सो हिगिंसन 8 years इसका पेन पाल रहा, और उसके बाद इनकी मीटिंग हुई. In 1872, she meets Judge Otis, whose wife was dead, and after many letters, he found himself involved in Dickinson. उसे romantically वो involve हो गया. Now, what happens in 1874, her father dies. In 1882, her mother dies. In 1883, nephew dies. In 1884, the judge dies. And in 1886, finally, Dickinson herself is dead. So now, it is basically for the reason that she saw many deaths in a sequence. Like, consequently, she was watching all the deaths. She was watching people dying, and those people, they were very close to her, very near to her, and especially her parents, then pen pals, then family members. And also I told you the reason कि उसके घर के पीछे cemetery थी, कब्रिस्तान था, जहाँ पे वो देखती थी अक्सर लोगों की deaths को. So death became very a dominant theme in the poetry of Emily Dickinson. So उसके जो major themes उसमें death, first of all, predominantly. उसके बाद truth है, जिसके बारे में बात करती है. Fame, she talks about it in many poems. Grief, which is there with death. Faith in God. Pessimism, जो कि हमें उसकी seclusion की life में नजर आता है. Loneliness, because she was herself a lonely person. Religion, जिसके वो discuss करती है in many of her poems. And love for the people, love for our own self, love for the humanity, ये भी उसके major themes में है. Famous works, because I could not stop for that, in 1863. So this was very important poem of Emily Dickinson, and so are the rest of them which are here. But you can see these are the most important poems by Dickinson. लेकिन आप इसमें देखें कि इसमें बहुत सारी poems जो they're related to death. The first one is related to death, and then I felt a funeral in my brain in 1861, also related to death. And then I heard a fly buzz when I died. This is also in 1862 and a death-related theme. It was not death, for I stood up. 1862, again a theme on death. And again, after great pain, a formal feeling comes. This is also about death. And then ghosts, which is not about that, but about related themes. So, and many of the poems that I haven't mentioned here, most of them are also addressing death as major theme in that. Now, because I could not stop for death, I'm discussing this because this happens to be one of the best poems written by Emily Dickinson. तो इसलिए हम इसको यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा minutely discuss करेंगे. No, because I could not stop for death, this happens to be an exploration of both the inevitability of death and the uncertainty that we find in the world, that people actually die. We see them dying. So she has taken this thing in consideration while writing this poetry. In the poem, a woman, like she is riding with a personified death. Death is here in shape of a man. The pronoun he is used for him, or his is used for him. So death is here in shape of personification. And in his carriage, she's sitting with him, and by all likelihood, she is heading towards certain place, which is an afterlife. So here the poem, the very poem that we are reading, it is referring to the fact that the poet is the poem underplays a fantastical nature. What is happening? Or a quick action is established, which is joining the journey and her afterlife, like she is experiencing her death. It's not clear if the speaker is already dead or she is traveling towards death. Like we are not told about this. Either way, her death is presented as something natural, strange, or inescapable. That's why we see that she's sitting with death, and she has no worries, pain, grief, or troubles or tensions. Indeed, the opening lines of the poem, they make it very clear that the speaker herself could not stop for death. And not many people would, but death has every intention of stopping for her. And now, notably, death here is presented as something of a gentleman, a very kind gentleman who very kindly stopping his carriage so that the speaker can get in. This suggests a certain comfort with, or at least acceptance of dying on the part of speaker. Even as this process actually entails many mysterious things. So there is a change that they pass through schools, they pass through, they see the recess time there, then they pass through the grain, and they pass through the setting sun, which is in fact passing them. Then the climate is changed, and now she's feeling that she's quivering, उसे ठंड लग रही है, she's feeling chilled, और ऐसा उसे लग रहा है कि ये जो मैं ट्रांसपोर्ट हो रही हूँ फ्रॉम वन वर्ड टू अनदर, एंड देन देयर आई फील कि वो जो टाइम था कितना शॉर्ट लिव्ड था. सेंचुरीज गुजरने के बाद भी लगा कि वो जो यानी बहुत शॉर्टर टाइम था जो कि मैं गुजार चुकी हूँ, और वो अपने उस ट्रेवल पे है इटर्निटी के. So this is another kind of analysis of the poem. Like we find personification. Okay, death, he kindly stopped for me, making death seem like a person who's stopping to pick her. So this is personification that she has used. Then we have alliteration, dues and drew, Hosmer and crown, tippet and tell. Then end rhyme, me and immortality. So they are rhyming. And symbolism, the Dickinson states that they pass the setting sun. So this may be a symbol to describe the end of a person's life, जिसकी life end होने वाली है. So this is a kind of an image related to the poem, because I could not stop for death. That lady is in a small gown with a scarf, and death is there personified as a gentleman who is there to pick her, and he is to take her to her last trouble, which is towards eternity, which is towards our death. So this was about Emily Dickinson, who was famous American poetess, and she is acknowledged for so many good works of poetry that she has written to her credit.